Just a Concerned Citizen by Damos on AO3. Chapter 17. Care. Hitoshi might have picked up some bad habits from his mentor. The moment he heard one of his former classmates mention the citizen, he knew that he'd be leaving the hospital as soon as he was able to move again. Yeah, his muscles might have been so stiff that it hurt to walk, but his escape only took 34 minutes. A new record. Eat your heart out, Eraserhead. He didn't even know who originally found out, or who had decided it was a bright idea to tell everyone, but they would be getting a lecture from him later. Or, more accurately, a lecture from Ida, while he stared at them to prove just how fucking tired their fuck-up had made him. He'd told them that they were all shit at keeping secret identities secret. And look what had happened. The exact thing he said was going to happen. That's what. They didn't even have the tact to wait until after the case was properly closed, and Midoriya was confirmed safe from the people who might hire assassins to kill him. Which was why he had walked back to the chemical plant and asked around until he got a better picture of the situation. Once he'd gotten out of his friends lecturing him on escaping the hospital, of course, Uraraka ended up explaining to him while floating chunks of concrete out of the hole that had been blasted through the ceiling of the room he'd been stuck in. Well, he told me about the emails and stuff, and he kept saying he worked with you, so I knew who he was. And he said that a quirkless person can help, and that he was one. Whatever the case, he could move around down there when no one else could. He seemed pretty sure of himself, and I figured he'd done stuff like this before, so I let him grab Momo. But then he just kept going. She huffed a sigh. I mean, I guess it's good that he did. I don't want to know what that hostage situation would have looked like, especially with you not there. Hitoshi decided not to remind her that he would have been there, just not very helpful. Instead, he opted to say, well, for the record, I think the most action he'd seen until today was getting punched in the face. Not that you knew that, but it was true. If you were only counting situations that Midoriya had run into, and not assassination attempts. Plus, putting it like that made Uraraka's reaction that much funnier. He what? She gasped, a small chunk of rubble flying out of her grasp to bump the far wall. Then why did he go back in? Hitoshi shrugged. He had a few theories to that question, but no hard answers. Why had Midoriya run outside the first night? Guilt? Desperation? Both? Whatever the reason, then, it was probably the same here. He told Midoriya, call me instead of running out and getting hurt, when they met, but that hadn't really been an option for him this time, had it? Was he proud of Midoriya for handling things as well as he had? Yeah. That didn't mean he wasn't also bitter that he'd put the man in a situation in the first place. You would have if it had been you. Who was in charge of the arrest? Gale Force. She smiled at his sigh. Good luck with that. Inuyasha was loud and boisterous, but that may have actually been a good thing for once, since Hitoshi's hearing still wasn't the best. He'd called Hitoshi's quirk, return to work, spirited and admirable, and directed him to the detention center that the villains had been hauled to, and the police station in charge of it. Spirited, right. He might have escaped from the hospital, but he would be lying to himself if he didn't admit the part of his flight didn't have to do with him avoiding his feelings. He was worried, obviously, but he was also nervous. In the moment, he'd been so certain of the fact that he would say something to Midoriya, but the longer he had to think about it, the more he wasn't sure that it was a good idea after all. Nut up or shut up warranted in his head, with Hitoshi, you dumb motherfucker. He's had 3 near-death experiences in as many weeks. He needs some time to recover at least. Even though the whole idea was that in his line of work there wasn't always the luxury to worry about things like that. But even then, there was the fact that Midoriya was a huge hero fanboy, and Hitoshi was not only a hero, but technically his superior, though that probably wouldn't be the case for long. Midoriya was probably going to get a promotion. And maybe now that he had done some saving himself, he wouldn't idolize the profession so much. Then they could give it a try, and he would have the chance to lean over and kiss Midoriya on every single one of those adorable freckles. Fucking hell, Hitoshi, you are not making this any easier on yourself, are you? Midoriya needed support. Friends, therapy, probably. He could do the first two, maybe arrange the third, and hopefully, somewhere along the way, he'd either get over his crush, or things would change enough that pursuing it would become a better idea. Assuming he didn't just blur out his feelings the next time he saw the man. Better to let his emotions settle before then. And hey, tying up loose ends is a pretty good reason to be out. By the time he'd gotten to the station, the tightness in his muscles had been replaced with an aching soreness that was starting to drag at his limbs. It had been a long day, and it was only getting longer. He spent a long time proving his identity, as was custom, and then endured another round of disappointed looks from people who thought he should be in the hospital, but knew they wouldn't be able to make him stay. "I'm fine to be out," he said, though he wasn't actually sure if that was true. "I'm just not supposed to use my quirk." The police liaison to the underground hero at the station was a woman that Hitoshi had heard of but never worked with, and who seemingly incredibly unimpressed with both him and the situation at large. "That's a shame," she says. "I hear you're good at getting people to talk, and no one who knows anything wants to." He wrote up a report that was probably more detailed than any she had gotten so far, and then started the process of listening and reading to the statements from the other heroes who had been on the scene. The prevailing option was that the villains had been woefully unprepared for a raid, their hideout unfinished, their weapons almost entirely used up, their research half destroyed but salvageable. Had it not been for the surprise nature of the weapon they had been using, his first group probably would have been successful on its own. Two of the villains had been identified as the kidnappers. One of them had a quirk that scrambled memories. One had a quirk that alerted them to how many people were in the area around her. A few appeared to be known muscle for hire, and a few other were working as chemical plants on their first offenses. The only quirk that he'd encountered that hadn't been accounted for whatever had been used to track Midoriya down through his laptop. The one person whose quirk hadn't been confirmed was a woman who had been taken to the hospital because she'd been caught in the explosion. Hitoshi was pretty confident that they weren't the same people, given the whole Quirkless angle. Unfortunately, she seemed to be the mastermind as far as he could tell, but until they had more information, there was no telling if that was the only operation of its kind, or if it was a branch of something bigger. Hitoshi prayed the former, and that whoever had tracked Midoriya down was someone who had been hired for a one-off. He was so fucking tired. After that, he went through the tedious process of getting a new secure phone and manually transferring over the contacts, as was standard procedure when there was a possible compromise. That was when he saw the text. "I think I might have just realized something important about the case. Please call me when you can." If the timestamp was right, he had already been in the building and was probably paralyzed when he got the message. Damn, timing. He worked on it for a few minutes before the realization hit him that likely the only reason that Midoriya had known something had gone wrong was because of him. Well, he certainly hadn't meant for his offer to go both ways. Fuck. He hated himself if things had gone any worse than they had. The fact that Midoriya had gotten injured was bad enough as it was, but at the same time, he didn't know if he had it in him for another, "Hey, don't go running into danger" talk. Not when Midoriya had ended up helping so immensely. On the upside, scrolling back in the group chat revealed a message from Kaminari that said, "He's awake and okay with visitors." So that was one worry off his mind, at least. He finished with the phone, stole a paper cup of coffee, and hung around outside the police station for a few minutes. Really, he should be heading back to the hospital for his own sake, if not Midoriya's. Instead, he boarded a train and rode to Shoto's agency. No one had ever accused Hitoshi of being the kind of guy who faced his own embarrassing feelings head on. Not that there was much to do at Shoto's besides pick up a few things that would make a hospital stay more comfortable and Midoriya's duffel bag. Hopefully, it wouldn't be coming right back here. Once he had that, he couldn't come up with any other excuses to stay away, except for the fact that the sun would be down by the time he got back, and maybe Midoriya would be asleep. His feelings had only gotten better in the sense that he hadn't been thinking about them. And now that he was, they felt like even more of a mess. He should at least wait until after the case was formally closed. But Midoriya was in the most danger before that. He was so tired, so lost in his thoughts, that as he walked through the hospital halls, he nearly walked face first into Bakugo. Wait, shit, Bakugo! God damn it, he almost managed to forget. If this son of a bitch had gone anywhere near Midoriya, he was probably going to lose his fucking mind. Based on the deep frown etched into the man's face, he'd certainly been doing something. He looked uncomfortable, at least, subdued in a way that Bakugo usually wasn't, which meant that Hitoshi's tactic of silently staring at him until he said something actually worked for once. You knew. Bakugo's voice was low. Knew what? Who Midoriya was? That they knew each other? That Bakugo had hurt him? Whatever he was talking about, Hitoshi didn't know enough. But he didn't have the energy to be anything but petty. Yeah, he said. There was a reason you didn't. Bakugo didn't explode in anger, though he looked like he wanted to. Jaw held tight and fists clenched. You said the plan was for him not to get killed. How the fuck did he end up fighting villains? The literal answer was that Hitoshi had been a dumbass and forgotten all contacts had included Midoriya, though he wasn't exactly about to admit that. The answer Hitoshi was looking for was a little more figurative, and it was also one he didn't have. I was going to ask him the same thing. He reached up to rub at his eyes, which were so tired they were starting to get dry. Why do you care so much? That struck a nerve. Bakugo sucked in a breath through his teeth and tensed up like he was about to throw a punch. Hitoshi took a careful step back, just in case, but the hit never came. Fucker just needs to take care of himself, and he won't. Plans on making other people look out for him until he dies, I guess. That didn't sound right. The Midoriya that Hitoshi knew seemed absolutely dedicated to making himself seem as little of a burden as possible. He got the feeling that this wasn't about Midoriya not taking care of himself, though there were arguments to be had that he didn't really want to. What, you think he isn't capable of defending himself? Is that it? Bakugo rolled his shoulders and flexed his jaw. I know he's not, or else he wouldn't be in there with who knows how many fucking broken bones. I think he did a pretty well job for someone with no backup and no idea how to fight. Hitoshi was actually assuming that last part, but it certainly hadn't seemed like it from what Hitoshi had seen. Both things can be fixed. Bakugo sputtered, face growing red. You can't seriously think he'll survive out there. You're fucking insane. He has so far, and that's a bigger feat than you think it is. He shrugged, knowing his apparent nonchalantness would infuriate Bakugo even more, though it wasn't even close reflecting to the boiling anger he was feeling right now. People telling him he can't do shit is how I ended up finding him. I know it's about time someone gave him a chance. He left that hang, Bakugo apparently not knowing how to respond before he continued. Do you need anything else? I was kind of in the middle of something. Bakugo scowled at him, but he didn't respond, and he didn't move to stop Hitoshi as he continued down the hallway, which was just as well, because Hitoshi would probably do something he regretted if that conversation continued for much longer. Yeah, if Bakugo was like that now, and he was worse as a kid, it's no wonder Midoriya had turned out the way he had. And he was only one person, There was no telling what else the man had been through. He took a long moment to lean against the wall and run a hand through his hair, trying to calm himself down. What an absolute fucking mess of a day. And he hadn't even seen Midoriya yet. He had given himself the perfect excuse, too. He was still carrying Midoriya's bag of things in one hand. He could just peek into the room, see that he was alright. He'd probably be asleep by now, so Hitoshi would be in and out and would have time to figure out what he wanted to say. Kaminari had also sent the room on the group chat, so at least it was easy to find. Hitoshi raised his hand to the door and paused. He would be asleep, and if he wasn't, then he just had to not say anything stupid. He could manage that. Hitoshi gave a light knock and slid open the door. There was a distinctive head of green curls that faced towards the window, whose owner turned to look at him as he ducked through the entrance. Midoriya blinked at him, and then a smile broke out over his face that was so wide it probably would have hurt without the scrapes and burns. Just seeing it made Hitoshi's heart swell with too much emotions to really process. Oh, he was going to do something stupid for sure. Strike one came right about as he crossed the room to drop Midoriya's bag at the floor of his bed. The green-haired man said, "Shinsou, I'm really glad you're okay." And he replied, "Call me Hitoshi. I think it's fair considering we've saved each other's lives." Midoriya flushed bright red, a very tired and bruised strawberry, but still. "Oh," he squeaked. "Well, then call me Izuku, please." Hitoshi couldn't help it. He smiled, which had Midoriya hiding his face behind an unbandaged hand. Yeah, if he hadn't planned to say anything, then come in here. Yeah, if he hadn't planned on saying anything, then coming in here had been a very bad idea. "So, Izuku." The man peered out at him, slowly lowering his hand to reveal still pink cheeks. "I hear you've had quite the eventful day." The smile had fallen, still there, but replaced with one a lot much smaller and more somber. "You did too, I think." His eyes dropped to his lap. "I'm sorry, I didn't figure things out soon, or none of this would have even happened." Alright, fair. Hitoshi shouldn't have expected this conversation to be all sunshines and roses. He held up a hand. The fact that you figured it out at all was already kind of absurd, you know? From what I have gathered, the only reason things weren't much worse was because you had them on back foot from the start. Which was probably why the villains had been so insistent on targeting Izuku, if he thought about it. They had guessed that he was the one who kept finding them out, and they had been right. I mean, I guess? One of Izuku's hands fidgeted with the hem of his blanket. Things turned out okay in the end, but there was so much opportunity for me to fuck up by going in there. Hitoshi only let the curse faze him for a second. That's just how this sort of thing works. Unfortunately, missions never go off without a hitch. Things always turn out okay despite that, and it's the best you can hope for. I fucked up this case myself, you know? Izuku blinked at him, and Hitoshi knew that he knew it was just that Midoriya tended to be his own worst critic. "The warehouse," he clarified. "If I hadn't revealed us there, I bet we would have had closed the case the first time we did a raid." "Ah, but that's not," Izuku blustered. "You couldn't have known they had a quirk like that." "No one can know everything." Through good lord, it seemed like Izuku tried, sometimes. Everyone got out, take the win. Strike two was when he leaned over and took Izuku's hand in his own. "Don't get me wrong, what you did was dangerous and stupid, but you did good." "Yeah, I knew it was bad. I just wanted to help." Izuku threaded his fingers to Hitoshi's own, and while he seemed too distracted by his thoughts to get embarrassed again, Hitoshi had to actively remind himself to keep breathing. I think this whole thing made me realize something. I think I'm not the kind of person who can just stand by and watch something happen. I try to be, and don't, I, I don't think I would have survived much longer like that." Izuku took a careful breath. When you said I would make a good hero, did you mean it? Hitoshi's heart soared. This was a lot to process. This was a man who finally believed that he was enough. I did. I'll help you make it there, if you want. That'll be nice. Izuku's eyes were misty, and his voice had gone rough, but he was smiling again, and gripping Hitoshi's hand tight. One condition, though. Well, Hitoshi had to bring it up somehow. Heroes have a requirement to go to therapy, and I know you don't think you've been through a lot, but you really have. You'll be seeing one once you get licensed anyway, so consider it an early start. He watched as Izuku's face went from worry to confusion to tired acceptance. No, I think that's fair, he said. I'm pretty sure that thinking better I hurt myself than them isn't the attitude a hero is supposed to have. God. No, Hitoshi agreed. It's not. Though scheduling things out would be rough, huh? Izuku pulled his hands out of Hitoshi's grasp and tapped at his chin, still seemingly unaware that they had been doing it at all. I mean, I guess I'm still in protective custody in the short term, but I'm pretty sure I've been evicted from my apartment by now, and therapists that are known to be Quirkless friendly are hard to find and probably pretty expensive. Hitoshi cut him off before he could start murmuring. If it helps with the second part, you're probably going to be offered a proper job, now that you can prove you've been freelancing. Then it'll be paid for through the agency. Izuku, smart as he was, looked totally dumbstruck at the idea that his high success rate as an analyst was worth something like a promotion. Then Hitoshi opened his mouth, and out came the third strike. And if it helps with the first, I have an empty room in my apartment that no one is renting right now. The angel on his shoulder told Hitoshi that he was doing a good thing, that Midoriya needed a place to stay that would be stable, and he had one, and so it only made sense. The devil screamed and cried and said, "This is insane. Why on God's green earth am I inviting my crush to be my roommate? What the fuck am I doing?" Midoriya perked up and said, "Oh, really? That would be amazing." And he was out. And they were roommates. If you genuinely thought that the Pining saga series, Pining era, was gonna end this chapter, you are heavily mistaken, my good sir. I also thought so too. I thought, oh my god, finally! Nope, no, we have to endure it. We have to endure it a bit longer, but stay steady, my friends, stay steady. This is very interesting. We are reaching the end. I don't know which fanfic is gonna take over this one. I'm gonna be honest with you. I haven't thought that through yet. I probably should. How many chapters? We're in chapter what? What chapter is this? Chapter 17, I think? Yeah, I think it's chapter 17. Let me check. Yeah, chapter 17, and, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, we only have 4 left. Yeah, no, I definitely need to be checking on which fanfic is gonna be taking over this, because 4 chapters. Whoa, Probably, I want to do another Shindeku fic, but I don't have another Shindeku fic, you know? That's the problem. I want to do more Shindeku, but there is no Shindeku to do. So, go ahead and give me some Shindeku fanfic recommendations down in the comments, and I will see what I can do if I can podfic them. So yeah, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.